and you may recognize that this is not Tom. This is, in fact, someone completely different, and that person is apparently one of your favorite guests. It's Curly. I am hosting for Tom today. This is a very special edition of Cars and Popcorn because my guest today is normally the host for today, and of course, that guest would be Tom himself.
Hey, Curly. You can stop presenting now, by the way. But,
All right. Bear with me because I am still figuring all of this out. Yay!
All right.
So today's topic. I'm not sure exactly how much Tom has said. I know he told me he's keeping a bit of a secret, but today's topic is incredibly mediocre because we're talking about Mad Max. I mean, there's there's a lot we could say about this franchise. It very much fits in with the ethos of Cars and Popcorn. It's a movie that centers around cars as characters in a way that the Fast and the Furious only tries to emulate. So, as per usual, I think we will start out with what is your favorite car of the franchise, and you've got 4 movies to choose from.
I've got 4 movies and 2 good ones to choose from, but since we're going to be talking about a lot of the cool ones, I did the interesting pick, as Curly pointed out, that there was a random '73 Charger in the background next to the music truck, and that Charger is actually one of my favorite body styles, and kind of there it is right now. Curly, if you speak, we can see it.
Yes. So, as Tom said, it's a '71 Charger. And I kind of ribbed Tom a little bit for this because, again, I understand what he did where he picked, a car that's not really the star, but man, there's just a ton of cars you can pick out of Fury Road. I think they built, 80-odd cars for that movie, and this is literally the only good picture I could find of this car. But it's still cool. Like, I could totally see, what I see this car as? I see this as the car that Bo and Luke Duke would drive in the Mad Max Apocalypse. Like, that back there is full of moonshine.
The back and the passenger seat, by the way.
Yeah, and that's Bo. That instead of having his bow and arrow, I'm sorry, not Bo. Luke, he is driving the harpoon cannon up there. And the scene that Tom is referencing, the reason you probably don't recognize this car is because this is where it shows up, and you're not looking at the car right down here. You're looking at the Doof Warrior, who is playing the guitar and launching flames. So
with the big flame guitar, yes, and the rockin' van. So
yeah,
it's not really noticeable, but I kind of caught it in one of those scenes. And the kind of like personal story behind that car is that back when I was just learning to drive, one of my racing buddies' father, actually offered me a '73 Charger that hadn't run in like 2 years. It was one of those run when parks situations. He offered me that for like $1,000 if I could get it running again. But that was at the time where I did not really have a job, and my parents weren't about to buy a car for me. So
much less one that.
But I still love that body style.
Oh, and it's very, very cool. I mean, it certainly says something about that movie when that style of Dodge Charger is one of the more boring cars. Because generally that would be the star of the show, but it's not.
Absolutely. And so now I'm throwing it back to you. Which one is your favorite?
Oh, let me find the picture. Just further along. Here we go. It is the one and only Giga Horse.
Yes.
Now, I just so you guys know, I did have a rule, and I asked Tom what his favorite car is. I said he could not pick the Interceptor because that's way too obvious, and I'm sticking by that rule as well. And of course, we will be talking about the actual Mad Max car later, but we have to get through some of the other cool stuff. Specifically, the Giga Horse. it's just so ridiculous, and that's what I love about it. And the whole ethos of this car is that in a world where most people barely have one of anything, Immortan Joe is the man who has two of everything. So he's got two 1959 Cadillac Coupe de Ville bodies. He has got two 502 cubic inch big block Chevrolet engines. Each of those engines has a supercharger, which actually work. And then each of those supercharged engines has two turbochargers on top of it. Now, the turbos in the movie didn't work, but like, holy crap, he literally has two of everything on this thing. And it's just so insane and over the top and ridiculous. And I just love that. It is truly the 1% of the apocalypse. Plus, if you could think about just driving this thing around, and it did work, it did drive. They actually got it up to 125 kilometers an hour, which is over highway speed. You just think about how would people react if you drove this around to your job.
So speaking of reactions, I was watching the special features, and the fun story about that car, I don't think you mentioned it, was that they basically had to build their own wheels for that thing, at least the back wheels. And
Yep.
the first thing I mentioned when I said that to Bob, my roommate, was the first thing he said back was, "How fast did they get that thing going?" And I didn't really remember the number, but those tractor tires are not speed rated, so they were testing the waters there.
Yeah, they were, and you think about, okay, they made their own wheels. Like, if they're not really well balanced, and those wheels and tires must have weighed, a couple 100 pounds each. Those things aren't balanced at 70, 80 miles an hour. They're going to start wobbling like crazy on this vehicle that is, I mean, just look how tall this thing is. It's taller than a friggin' monster truck. Like, it's just so ridiculous. And I just love how they went, okay, we've got an over the top villain. We need the most over the top car we can possibly think of, and they just knocked it out of the park. So I just love the insanity of that one vehicle.
And TJ in the chat described it pretty well. He called it Christine on steroids with the Venom symbiote.
Yeah, pretty much. And then what's cool is at the end of the movie, it gets stolen by the heroes. And if there's a Mad Max, Fury Road 2, I'm sure that Furiosa will be driving that thing, and it will probably be even cooler,
or at least less excessive. I'm sure some of those things were a bit excessive.
No, it needs to be exactly that excessive. I mean, I would see them taking off all the Immortan Joe logos, but everything else is just exactly the way that it is. What's kind of neat is, so as we were queuing up for all this, I was mentioning just how much insane detail the production team put into these cars. So one of the things that you only catch a couple of glimpses of in the movie is if you look at the dashboard of the Gigahorse, hold on, if you look at the dashboard of the Gigahorse, then you will see just 100 different car logos. So they went into a junkyard and just started prying off all the different car badges and then put them all over the dash, and they were supposed to be like, the kill marks on the side of a fighter jet. So these are all the cars that he had taken out and conquered.
There were some interesting badges on there too. I saw some weird ones.
Mm-hmm. They're probably all Australian.
Not all of them. I caught some French ones in there. I'm pretty sure there was a Peugeot or a Citroen. Maybe I think there was even a Reliant somewhere in there.
Probably there was. Again, it's so much detail in those things. Like when you look underneath the back of the Gigahorse, they're two giant Immortan Joe logos. You look in the roof, and they're all hand beaten into the roof. It's just tons and tons and tons of detail. And of course, you realize that with the comparative budgets of Fury Road and any of the other Mad Max movies, like any one of these cars cost more than the entire rest of those movies took to make, But that's what you can do when you have vision and a budget to match.
The Gigahorse alone probably costs more than the original.
Oh, easily. I mean, that's over $100,000 of probably more like $200,000 of fabrication and engineering and design and all that good stuff. So you think about it this way: you could either have the Gigahorse or a new Ferrari, and honestly, I think I know which one I would pick. Nobody will ever tailgate you in that thing.
Surprisingly, that makes the Ferrari look practical.
Exactly. But look at all that trunk space you have. So much storage. I mean, it's hard to get in. And Ingress and Egress are probably a bit difficult, but still.
I mean, you're going to need a trebuchet to get the things into the trunk, by the way, but you do have trunk space.
Indeed.
So you
So,
you mentioned budget. That's kind of the interesting thing about the Mad Max series, since they were at such a shoestring budget in the originals. They had like no costume budget.
mhm.
They basically rated the Dick's Sporting Goods for that, and 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 then you get the mass excessiveness of Fury Road, and they finally get like a real budget instead of spending it on expensive CGI and rendering. They spend it on sweet cars that they slightly touched up with CGI.
Yeah, one of my favorite bonus features on the DVD is the compilation they have of all of the completely raw footage of the crashes and the testing and the stunts. And I mean,
That is a wonderful special feature. If anyone owns the Mad Max Fury Road Blu-ray, go in, watch those behind the scenes footage. It's fantastic.
after we're done.
Of course.
After we're done. Yeah, and it's so to compare the budget of Fury Road and even just the original movie. So the original movie, their entire car budget was $20,000, and I don't know if that was U.S. or Australian, but that 20,000, they went to an auction and they bought two ex police car Ford Falcons. They were both Falcon XBs, and then they also bought an old taxi cab, and then they bought a third Falcon XB, which was a civilian model but had been repossessed, and those were their main cars for the movie. This is one of the cop cars. This was actually his personal Interceptor. And I want to clear up a bit of nomenclature, and it doesn't help that Fury Road kind of screwed it all up. So the car you're seeing right now, this is an Interceptor in the Mad Max universe. And I do not have a picture of the back of the car, but the back of the car says Interceptor on the back of it. The car everyone calls the Interceptor, which is Mad Max's car, is actually the Pursuit Special. And if you're really, really well versed in Mad Max lore, this isn't even the original Pursuit Special. That is, and I've lost it. Where'd it go? Lost the picture. Ah, found it again. Here we go.
Here we see running through PowerPoint.
Here we go. This is actually the original Pursuit Special, and it's the car that Knight Rider steals at the very beginning of the first Mad Max movie. It sets off the whole plot of the movie. And if you're well versed in Australian car lore, this is a Holden Monaro. And so right away, you're setting up the Ford versus GM battle.
R.I.P. Holden.
Exactly. Ford v. Holden, and what wins? Ford. So this is the original Pursuit Special.
Neither, sir. Actually, technically, Holden won because Ford Australia shut their doors first.
Yeah, but this is 1979 we're talking about. But in context of the movie, the Holden here gets destroyed, and then Max's MFP Interceptor gets, it basically looks like this after that chase. They totally destroyed the other two cars. There's a scene where, so in that opening chase, the March Hare, which is, I forget which characters it's driven by, but it's one of the other, it's the one that rolls over at the end. That was the taxi cab, and the car was so worn out when you see it smoking. That's not a special effect. That's actually the engine smoking because the thing was completely worn out. Now, this car here still exists, but nobody knows where it is. Most of the Mad Max cars, they know what happened to them, but this one got sold off, and there's a couple of replicas that people claim are the original, and they've been disproven, but nobody knows where the actual original Mad Max Interceptor is that, again, Max drove in the first movie.
Somebody should check Mel Gibson's garage for that.
Oh, I'm sure it's in a barn somewhere in Australia. Well, like Max's Interceptor, or I'm sorry, the Pursuit Special, that sat in a junkyard for a decade. They were going to scrap it after the Road Warrior, and the junkyard owner knew what it was, and he couldn't bring himself to scrap it, so he just parked it out back. I think it went to another junkyard after that, and then finally someone spotted it, knew what it was, and bought it, restored it, and now it sits in a museum in Miami. So you can see the original Interceptor. And I don't remember what configuration they've got it in, but the original car still exists, and it's in a museum where it belongs.
Belongs in a museum.
It does.
Of course it does, because it's the last of the V8 Interceptors.
If I have one complaint about Fury Road, there's not enough Australian accents.
There's also not much talking.
Well, that's fine. And but you see, that's what's so impressive about Fury Road is, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like a silent film where the actions on screen and silent film era wasn't so much the music because they just played whatever they had, available, or whatever their in studio pianist could play. But in Mad Max, it's the music and the visuals. It's the other senses that convey the plot and convey the character growth, and they don't rely as much on words, because it's easy to tell people exactly what you're thinking in a narration or a voiceover. It's a lot harder to show them what you're trying to think.
It's funny you mentioned that, because they actually wrote this movie in storyboard form. This was, again, one of the special features of the of the Fury Road DVD. They had massive walls of pictures, and that was the story of Fury Road. The words were just added in later as basically secondary, but the story was created in images, and that's how they tell the story. That's how it's conveyed in the movie, and it's basically art in motion at that point, with all the like we mentioned, all the details they put in these cars, all the effort they put into the visual effects.
Oh yeah, it's very much they really take advantage of the fact that movies are a visual medium, because there's some movies that you could almost do them as radio programs. They have so much talking and exposition, and so much of the plot is done verbally or orally, whereas Mad Max, it's totally the opposite. If you just turn off your TV and you listen to the audio, you'll have no idea what's going on. You'll just hear a bunch of crashes and explosions. I mean, it'll sound awesome, but you'll have no idea what's going on. All right, let's see. So I started with Mad Max at the end. I started with Fury Road, and then I sort of circled around. I saw Fury Road, Mad Max, Road Warrior, and Thunderdome in that order. And I'm really glad I actually saw them in that order, specifically Fury Road last, because it is by far the best. I did rewatch Road Warrior all the way through, and yeah, Fury Road is still my favorite.
So, hate to cut you off, but Sam actually brings up a good point in the chat that the lack of Australian accent is probably due to changing the filming to South Africa instead of Australia.
True, but they are actors. Like, they're supposed to act.
I mean, look, man, when you get actors to change their accents, a lot of times it turns out really bad.
This is true.
Unless you're like Ritter or anything, or Alan Rickman. Unless you're like Alan Rickman, it's going to be a struggle. Tom Hardy can switch between English and Australian because it's pretty close. So, and plus he was just grunting the whole time anyway.
Yeah, that's what I thought was kind of fun. Was they make it very clear in the special features. I kind of wish they made it a little more clear in the movie. Is that at the beginning of Fury Road, he has had so little contact with people. He hasn't talked in years. So the whole, starting out in the movie, he just doesn't talk to anybody. And what he does say when he meets Furiosa and the wives is very short and curt and very straight to the point. It's only a couple of words because he's not used to talking and he's not used to interacting with people. But as the movie progresses, he gets more and more comfortable with it. And he doesn't necessarily trust them, but he is more comfortable with, that human interaction. They say he's basically feral at the beginning of Fury Road.
There's also a theory that Max in Fury Road is the kid from Road Warrior.
Yeah, certainly that would be an interesting theory. I have not heard that one. I kind of like how the timeline of Mad Max doesn't actually work as it is in the movies, and even with they had a pre-Fury Road comic book, and even if you include the video game, it's much more interesting to think of it not as a connected, perfect universe, but as a bunch of stories being told by the people who lived them. So, um, for example, Fury Road is, or I'm sorry, not Fury Road, Road Warrior is told by the feral kid after he learns how to speak, or Fury Road is told by Furiosa, or maybe one of the wives. Like that could be actually be a story from the wives to their future children. And then Thunderdome is probably told by some of the kids that are saved at the end. Like if you think of it that way, it makes a lot more sense. You don't really know where these things line up, but it's just coming out of your memory like most of our history used to be. It was all oral and verbal. So I like how the timeline doesn't really work. It again fits in with their universe of there is no written record. Everything is passed down orally.
Yep, it's it's they've gone past that point. I think they went too deep into the lore in Thunderdome. That was kind of the kind of the weird part. I like in Road Warrior where it was just a passing mention rather than the plot of half the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But
So let's see. I'm just gonna choose a car here, and let's have a little bit of fun with this, Tom. I want you to tell me which movie this car is from. And you should actually, this one shouldn't be too hard if I can get the, come on. All right, Tom, what do we got on screen?
oh man, that is pretty sure that's Road Warrior, but that is a mid-engine something.
So it's actually twin engined. There's one in the back and there's one in the front too. You can see the rear one is supercharged. The front is allegedly turbocharged.
I can see the turbos.
It's called officially they call it well officially slash unofficially it's called the Lone Wolf. Um, so you're right. It is from Road Warrior. Fun fact: it actually shows up in Thunderdome. They redid the body. They added some fenders. They added a cockpit and a few other things, and then they just like hid it in the background of some of the scenes so that people wouldn't recognize it. Because they had it sitting around, and they were just like, "Oh, hey, we already have an Apocalypse car. Let's use that one again." But they hid it in the background just to fill out the scenes, and then they very sadly crushed it. But
I mean,
yeah,
sure, why not? But
yeah, but so it was actually supposed to be Max was supposed to drive this car during the tanker chase. He was supposed to drive it, and it was supposed to be as fast as Humongous's car, which is why it's twin engined and very open and lightweight. And both engines actually worked, but the rear engine wasn't hooked up to anything. It was probably based off of a Ford F100 truck chassis because it turns out most of the cars in Road Warrior that were custom were built off of a Ford F100, such as Humongous's truck. Um, and after Road Warrior, it was a display at a go-kart track, and that's where they bought it and then used it in Thunderdome and then crushed it. But yeah, it's just kind of cool, and it definitely shows you, even back in whatever this was, 1981 or 82, like kind of the theme they were starting to go with for Mad Max. It's not just a car that's been tweaked a little bit; it's completely custom made.
yeah, and like you mentioned earlier, they literally took these cars, built them up, and did their independent tests, which probably weren't that extensive, but I guess they tested them to the point where they were willing to put stuntmen into them.
Yeah, and when you look at all these visuals in all the movies, because obviously the original three were pre CGI. It's obviously people were injured, but nobody was injured, very badly, and more importantly, nobody was killed because George Miller, aside from being a director, he was a doctor and he took the Hippocratic Oath and he did not want to kill any of his stuntmen during all these stunts. They took it very, very seriously and they worked very hard to ensure they were impressive but safe.
Yeah, but they kind of came close on the rollover scene, the very famous rollover scene at the end of Road Warrior.
Hmm. Yeah, there was there were a few ways that could have gone wrong, and it kind of did. But even then, they were really careful. Like, so if you look really closely at the back of the truck cab, they built these two sort of ramps so that if the tanker disconnected and shot forward, it would go up and over the cab instead of right into it.
Yeah, I forget what movie took that record from it, but at the end of Road Warrior, they accidentally set the record for most car rollovers.
Yeah. Oh, the other record they set was, I think, the most times a stuntman went flying through the air. So there's the scene where the one biker, one of the cars spins out and a biker T-bones it and he flips over it. And originally he was just supposed to go flying over it. When the stuntman hit the car, his foot caught on the bike and he just starts pirouetting in the air, and he just went limp. But he just went spinning and spinning and spinning. And then what's really cool is he came back for Fury Road and he was driving the Interceptor when they blow it up and flip it over, because he said, "Well, I just set a record. I set a record in the '80s for doing pirouettes. I want to do another record for car rollovers," and so they did. And if that's not the most stuntman thing in the world, I don't know what is.
I'll tell you what's one of those stuntman things: the final scene of, well, the epic climax of Fury Road, when they again thought that the stuntman was killed when they
Mm-hmm.
did that final canyon scene. What was his
Yeah, when
name
they
again?
crashed the war
I
rig.
wrote it down. Lee Adamson. Lee Adamson. They thought that his head had hit as the truck was flipping, but they realized later when he got out that it was just the dummy that they had in the car bouncing off.
Yeah, they didn't seatbelt the dummy in, and he popped out of the sunroof. And watching this on the monitor in real time, like, yeah, I could see, like, holy crap, we just took off the top of a stuntman. And nope, he's strapped in. Forgot about the dummy.
Stuntman gets out. Hey guys.
Yeah, that was great. He didn't get right out. They had to friggin' jaws of life him out. But he hops right out. And of course, George Miller is crapping himself like, oh my God, we just killed somebody. So
Oh
one of
yeah.
the other things I find really interesting about, and I guess this is about the Mad Max franchise, and I guess this is because George Miller wrote all of them, is how many things carry over or are themes between films. So this is Road Warrior, and this is the Mack truck right before it crashes. So it's a Mack truck, right? A Mack R600 specifically, R600 model 18 wheeler. So this is Road Warrior, but then you go to Fury Road, and here's another Mack R600 truck. This is the truck that tows away the Interceptor after it crashes. So it doesn't get a lot of scene time, but it's, again, one of those things where it's a theme that carries from one movie to the next. Or like the Lone Wolf car, they repurposed it as a different vehicle later on, and they did the same thing with actors and characters. Um, Road Warrior and Thunderdrum both have pilots. They're both the same actor, but they're two different characters. And the mechanic in Road Warrior and Thunderdome, same actor, very different characters. So there are things
Organic
like that
mechanic.
they, yeah, no, he was a Blackfinger, an actually his character in Thunderdome is Blackfinger, because that was the mechanic. But obviously, Organic Mechanic is also the best name for a doctor ever. But I just love how things like that carry over. Like, you have a Mack truck in Road Warrior that's a hero car, and then you have a Mack truck in Fury Road that is a villain. Things get carried over and changed, and I just, again, it's one of those things. It's very subtle, but if you know what you're looking at and you know a lot of the lore, you can see things like that. And again, I think it's very helpful that you had one director write all four of these movies.
Yeah, I mean it was his baby. The Fury Road was his dream since he made the original and he made Road Warrior. So
Mm-hmm.
while I still love Road Warrior, Fury Road was like the culmination of all the Mad Max over the years.
I mean, if there was never another Mad Max after this, I would not be upset, because it's almost a perfect movie. Like, there's so many ways it could go wrong from here. Like Road Warrior was great, and then you had Thunderdome. and then Fury Road was just so many steps above Road Warrior. It's like, where do you go from here? And I wouldn't be upset. Obviously, it's going to be very difficult to top Fury Road. If they just get anywhere near it, if they get between Road Warrior and Fury Road, great. And I certainly think they can. But sometimes it's just good to say, you know what? Let's just leave it here.
By the way, I wasn't going to go there, but Devon in the chat has mentioned that you said Thunderdrome several times. It is Thunderdome.
Oh, is it? Oh.
Yeah.
Thunderdrome is cooler sounding, so.
2 men enter, 1 man leave. 2 men enter, 1 man leave.
Oh, man, if I keep saying it wrong, that might actually happen here. So we have talked a number of times already about how much effort went into the vehicles specifically for Fury Road. But, you could say this about any of the movies, but again, specifically in Fury Road. So this is a MAN. What is it called again? I'm sorry, no, it's a Tatra T815 6-wheel big rig. It's used for military purposes, hauling around like tanks and other crap like that. So this is the original truck. This is how they bought it. Please go back. That's what they turned it into.
Yes.
This is the war rig. And there's 6 wheels, and that's about all you can tell that it's the original truck. Everything else has been tweaked and modified and changed and moved and fiddled with.
And that's the thing that George Miller describes as the 3rd most important character behind the humans.
And it really is. It is, it's by far the biggest set on screen. It's the one you see most often. For whatever that is, a 2-hour runtime, like you spend at least an hour inside of the war rig. But again, it just shows how much vision they had. They could turn this into this. It's just, insane. And again, I love it. It's got so much detail and so much going on in there. And I would love to just walk around this thing and look at it and pick out details and just generally drool over it.
And they created that body, I believe, that I saw by basically chopping a Chevy Fleetmaster in half.
Mm-hmm.
They did have 3 different war rigs because they knew they were going to have some issues with that being one of the main things. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice that the lockable throttle that it has is simply one of those extendable shoe gauges. Mm-hmm. They just extend the gauge and jam it in there essentially.
Yeah, it's kind of neat how they made the body. So in the first picture, you can see it's the body's over the front axle, right up in the front end. So they took that cab off, moved it back, cut out the back of it, threw on the back of the Fleetmaster, and then they made up this hood. And the 2 of those war rigs had the original V8 engine, whatever it was, 275 horsepower. They found out that wasn't enough for hauling around this giant tanker in the desert. So the 3rd one they built had a 600 horsepower rally racing engine in it. It specifically an engine that would power a Dakar support vehicle. So the Dakar, just briefly, is this desert race. It takes place over like a week and is out in the middle. It used to be held in the African desert. Now it's held in the South American desert. And so a 600 horsepower engine. So they have these trucks that follow the race cars around, and that powers one of those support trucks. So basically, it's a rally racing vehicle with a giant freaking tanker on it. But I just love that before and after of, like, here's the boring car, here's what we turned it into.
And unfortunately, it's not really the 1,200 horsepower twin engine that they claim in the movie. Which is unfortunate, but it's, like you said, still cool in its own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's definitely badass on its own. Like, even though the superchargers on top are fake, it's still just really cool. I love how the front end loader bumper works, actually did its thing. A lot of the stuff in there is just totally functional. And it is a movie vehicle. It's gonna get beat up. It just has to look cool, but it's I just love how much they changed it. Like, you think about that original truck, and it's like, okay, this is a big block of marble, and the war rig is the Statue of David. You start out with this boring thing, and you turn into this awesome work of art. And I, again, going to Fury Road and what they've said about the vehicles, and again, you can really extend this to any of the Mad Max movies. Is um, just because something is scrap and salvaged doesn't mean that it can't be loved. And they specifically notice that humans will sort of fetishize mechanical things like, yeah, your car is a piece of crap that you pieced together out of a whole bunch of different cars over years in the wasteland, but you have that love and effort put into it. It's your vehicle, it's the thing you have, it's the one thing that connects you to anything else. It very much
It's funny you
captures
mentioned that.
the
It's
spirit
funny
and
you
freedom of
mentioned
the
that
car.
because that was actually George Miller's intention with any of the Mad Max series was that the your car in this world that he created represents status. That's why Immortan Joe's car was so excessive with so much of his logos, with so much customized for his health situation. Uh, it was created as his status symbol to show that he was, you know, elite. It was like
Mm-hmm.
you said, it was the 1% of the apocalypse.
Very much so. So I think we've stalled long enough. I think we have to talk about the car everyone actually wants to talk about, or at least hear
Wait,
about anyway.
I think we need to get boring here
Or do
before.
we?
I don't know if you included pictures of them, but we have to talk about the pole cars.
I did not, but sure, let's go ahead.
Is
I'm
that
all for that.
I I know you and I are both engineers, and this presents probably in a world where they created a truck out of that little whatever I'm forgetting blanking on the
The
name.
Tatra.
In the world where they're creating cars left and right, this was the one thing that they were going to do CGI. That was the thing they planned to do CGI, but all the tests Miller claimed looked puppeteered. So the stuntmen, being as well, the crew was being as bold as they were like, you know what, we've done all this. Screw it. We're gonna actually make this real. And just find hearing them talk about just finding the poles, you have to find something that's strong enough to support a human, that's going to flex enough for them to be able to perform these stunts, and you also have to balance this on a car. So we're dealing with weight, we're dealing with strength, we're dealing with flexibility, and we're throwing literal humans on top of this. They started out going real slow. They had their Cirque du Soleil actors or Cirque du Soleil performers running on these things because, of course. And this was the one moment that Tom Hardy mentioned as probably the scariest moment of filming because, of course, he had to film a scene where one of the pole guys grabs him and he has to go on this massively tall swinging pole. And the fact that they were able to work out the math, do the engineering work, and find poles that were able to perform these activities is all the more amazing when it comes to this movie that they didn't have to do barely any CGI on these scenes.
Oh, absolutely. It's especially for Tom Hardy. There's, I know it showed up in one of the bonus features. I think it was the one that we're interviewing Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron afterwards, and maybe it was, I can't remember which bonus feature it was, but there's one where they're showing one of the rehearsals, or I guess one of the takes, and Tom Hardy gets slammed into the dirt while he's driving. The car is moving. They do the scene where he is just above the dirt, and they got him a little wrong, and he bounced off the ground. Like, yeah, more power to him for actually. I don't know if that was him or if it was a stuntman because they only showed the quick video shot of it. I think it was him though. But even if it wasn't, like that's an
He did it.
insane stunt.
He did it like you said. He was terrified to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but he was more than happy to participate.
I want to know if he was worried about it, and then Charlize Theron's like, "Oh, I'll just do it." She does it once. He's like, "All right, I'm going to do it now. I can't be showed up like that." So I feel like just very, very briefly, because I know I don't want to talk too much about Thunderdome. Are you kidding me? Come on. But speaking of actors and actresses who did their own stunts, come on. So I'm having technical difficulties because I've never done this before. We have to briefly talk about Auntie because it's Tina Turner, and this is the ridiculous car she drove with a friggin' helicopter turbine engine in it and a gas-powered engine. She actually drove it throughout the entire movie. Every single scene you see of Auntie driving, that's actually Tina Turner. And when you think about, okay, this is a home-built vehicle in the 80s, and there's nothing in front of you, and you're doing these 60-mile-an-hour chases, and a pretty famous or not actress, singer is doing these stunts. Like, as mediocre as this movie is, it's pretty friggin' impressive that she actually did it all herself.
It is impressive, and if we have to talk about this movie, I will say, if you watch Thunderdome and you turn it off after like the first hour, where they leave Bartertown, it's actually a pretty good movie. It goes off the rails when they start talking to kids and going into the whole lore of why those kids are there, but the Tina Turner parts are surprisingly pretty good.
You're right. The whole setup in Bartertown and in the Thunderdome is really good. But there's one important thing that scene with the kids in the River Valley camp gave us. Do you remember? Do you remember what it was? We wouldn't have had member berries if it wasn't for member.
Uh,
I really want to know now if South Park actually stole that from Thunderdome, because if they did, just more power to them.
I don't remember.
I don't know if they've ever said it, but that's still. I was watching, so I was watching that last night. Actually, I have to admit, I was watching Thunderdome for the very first time last night, for good reason. But I watched it, and I kept hearing, remember this, remember that. I'm like, holy crap, that's South Park. That's South Park 30 odd years before they actually did it. But yeah, I thought it was fit to mention that Tina Turner actually drove her own car, but just like a number of other famous actors, she couldn't drive stick. They originally built that as stick, and they had to change it to automatic so she could actually drive it. But still, more power to her for actually doing that.
I feel like with a go kart they could have just made that sequential. Just make it a sequential rally style gearbox, but I'm not sure what the base car was.
Or just like one gear. Why do you even need a transmission? Just make it direct drive. Yeah, I have no idea. And that's so it's kind of sad because after Thunderdome, they crushed a lot of the Mad Max cars. So I guess at this point, because it had only been what 6 years or so between the original Mad Max and Thunderdome, they had kept most of the cars, the ones that weren't destroyed. And for the premiere of Thunderdome, they showed off all the Thunderdome cars at the Sydney Motor Show. So 1985, they got put in storage until 1994, and then they found the storage locker and like we're never going to use these, and they crushed most of them. Which, no matter what your thoughts on Thunderdome are, it's kind of sad because that is part of the Mad Max lore. Those are vehicles, and it would have been nice to see. Like, it would have been cool to see them appear in Fury Road, even heavily modified, just like they took the Lone Wolf and Road Warrior, tweaked the crap out of it, and then shoved it into Thunderdome. I really like, again, how they take these ideas and things and sort of move them between movies and do the things like that.
And I feel like they probably could have taken that Tina Turner's go kart from Thunderdome and moved it in there into Fury Road. It would fit in pretty well.
Yeah, and Thunderdome definitely shows you from a car perspective how they were starting to move. They were moving away from, you took a base car and threw a big fuel tank on it, into there's nothing left. There are no more cars to modify. You just take whatever you can find and stick it together and hope that it works. And Fury Road is still sort of, it's in between those where there's still cars to salvage, but there are fewer and fewer of them, and you have to make do with whatever you can find.
And what you do have left, you might end up with just the body over this weird custom chassis.
Funny you mentioned that. So when I asked you what your favorite Mad Max car was that was not the Interceptor, I genuinely thought you might go with this. This is called the Peacemaker, and I thought you'd go for it
Yes.
because it's a Plymouth Valiant Charger, which because again I know how much you love the Charger. I thought, okay, this is probably what Tom will go for because it's friggin' amazing. But I still like your choice, even if it was somewhat boring. But this is so cool. It's a mining vehicle. Like
and the stuntmen refer to this car as a mid-engine tank vehicle muscle car mounted on a tank.
yeah, I mean, if as much as I love the Giga Horse, this is definitely one of the cooler cars, and it deserved so much more screen time than it did. It definitely didn't
I
deserve to
mean,
get blown up in the movie.
practically those treads are going to be a lot better than even some of those off-road tires. They're in a good place.
Yeah, this is the one vehicle that is never getting stuck ever. I mean, this is for all you people trying to prep for the post-apocalypse. This is what you want to build. Stop taking a Miata and lifting it. Build a tank. Just build a tank. You will be so much better off.
Are you saying you don't want that Hyundai Walking Dead edition?
No, I don't. I don't. Well, you know what's really funny? Like, so, and Mad Max partly spawned this. There's a whole trend in automotive customization called battle cars, and it's where you take a regular boring car and you basically turn it into a Mad Max car. You lift it up, you put big tires on it, you put a big smashing bumper on it, you take off the doors, add a bunch of survival gear. You're officially not allowed to add guns, but you know some people kind of do. And there's even a race for them, the Gambler 500. And the whole idea is it's kind of like the Lemons $500 races, except you're off roading, you're not on a racetrack. And people build some really wild stuff. Um, but my problem with all those people is every single one of them picks a car with EFI. And if you notice all the vehicles in Mad Max, they're all carbureted. And the reason is, in the Mad Max universe, it's a nuclear apocalypse. If you have a nuclear bomb go off, it fries all your microprocessors. So EFI would never work. So these people are like, oh, I've got this awesome post-apocalyptic car. It's like the moment a nuke goes off, it won't ever run again. So build a tank and make sure it's carbureted. So, you know, learn how to clean and rebuild a carburetor. It's a good tip for life anyway.
Yeah, that's got to be a freaking nightmare with all the dust going through that. And that had to be a nightmare on the set, as they pointed out. And again, I go back to the special features. One of the first questions that the team that created these cars asked to George Miller was, "So how are we going to control the dust?" And his answer was simply, "We're not. The dust is our friend."
Yeah, there is no controlling dust in that environment. It's going to get everywhere, and you're going to have to love it. I think Charlize Theron said for like 8 months straight, we did nothing but breathe dust. You know, she said for 8 months we could not breathe. So my second favorite car, at least in Fury Road, we'll go back to the shot. So we've already talked about the Charger. Oh, speaking of dust, so all the carburetors on the Charger, so you have 3 or 6 total dual downdraft carburetors. Talk about dust and a pain in the ass and cleaning. This setup would suck. But I want to talk about the doof wagon because when I'm not writing or talking about cars, I enjoy playing guitar. And so for me, the doof wagon is really, really cool. It just a billion speakers. And apparently the guitar here actually worked both as a guitar. It sounded terrible, but it worked, and also as a flamethrower. And actually, the actor here could actually control the flamethrower. So when he set it up, so when it sets off, he actually set it off, and it worked really well. It's just such a again. So the whole idea of this is, when you in the olden days when you led an army into battle, you would have a fife and a
Yeah, the
drummer.
drummer.
Yeah, and that they would tell you when to charge, tell you when to retreat. They would give orders through music because you didn't have radios. So in a post-apocalypse where radios no longer exist, you still need that fife and drummer. But when everybody's got a loud, supercharged, turbocharged, unmuffled V8, you need something a little bit more than a fife and drummer. So you go with a dual neck guitar and a flamethrower and gigantic tom drums on the back of a air conditioning vehicle. It's just again another over the top, insane, ridiculous vehicle.
And I think at least some of those amplifiers worked.
They
I know
all
not all of
worked.
them.
Nah,
Probably some.
I guess it depends on who you ask. Either way, it doesn't really matter how many of them worked because the story goes that so many of them worked that the actors occasionally had hard times hearing the director over the sound of the guitar. And the dude would be up there, so is an actual musician. He would be up there for like 6 hours just playing guitar because George Miller is slightly insane. Everything had to be totally real. And we thank him for it. All right, so I think now we have to talk about, again, now that we've made it through most of the hour, I think we have to talk about the one,
The Lost of the V8 Interceptors.
the last of the V8 interceptors. And I love how it evolves, and I'm really curious if they do another Mad Max, what they're going to do with it. So this is the Pursuit special after the original movie. It's a Falcon XB coupe, which is the generation. It was, I guess, a second generation. I'm not really sure. I don't know Australian cars well enough, but it's a Ford Falcon, 351 V8. That supercharger does not work. It's only there for show, but still looks cool. They threw in a radio. The body. So you notice you have a similar Falcon in Max's car. This is actually a Big Bopper, but it's a similar Falcon. You'll notice the front ends are completely different. It's actually an aero front end that was originally developed for basically Australian NASCAR. It was the same idea as the Superbirds. I think it was originally sold by Ford, but I'm not sure if that's right or not. But they found it, and they're like, oh, that looks really cool. So they threw that on. The two spoilers are from a Holden. The fender flares are from another Holden, again, GM cars. And then they threw on individual exhaust pipes, but only two of them were actually hooked up to anything. But it's still cool. Like it's both futuristic, but not like too far, because that was the setting of the movie was, in the not so distant future, and for 1979, this is definitely the not so distant future.
Definitely not. That was kind of a theme of movies at that time, with the whole post-apocalyptic thing that's going to happen soon. So they kind of wrote it in that all those cars were going to be 70s and 80s cars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and here's another shot of it again. It's just it's very it's both simple and also kind of complex. It doesn't really show up well in this shot, or any of these shots really, but it was called the black on black because you have a gloss black body, but then all the bumper and the fender flares and skirts, that was all flat black.
Black interior, black everywhere.
Yeah, what's really funny is the original car was white. It was white. Way. Oh, it absolutely is. And it was actually kind of a rare car because apparently in 1973, Ford only made 6 Ford Falcon XB GT coupes with the 351 Cleveland V8 in white. So surely for as many people as love the Pursuit Special, there are probably a few people who are pissed off that one of the only original white cars is no longer white.
Oh, boo-hoo.
Yeah, I don't care, but it's just a neat little factoid. Another shot of it in the original movie, and then they really changed it up for Road Warrior because Road Warrior is an actual apocalypse, so they took off the front bumper, they removed the trunk and threw in a couple of extra fuel tanks, removed most of the interior. It's much more of a survivalist car.
Yeah, because that supercharger's pretty hungry, so he's going to need some spare fuel, and it's going to be even more hungry now that you add in a ton of weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you destroy the air by removing the trunk, but by the time they got to Road Warrior, the supercharger actually worked, and it actually would disconnect when they wanted it to. That don't remember exactly how they made that button work, but it did disconnect when they pushed the little switch. that you see in the movie. And then the whole thing is it's still a road car. It's still really fast, but it's changing with its times. It's a tool, and it's now at first you started with sort of a minor a downturn, but now this is a true apocalypse, and the vehicle is now reflects that. As does Max and all of his gear, because he's wearing the same leather jacket he wore in the original movie, but it's been torn up and chewed up and changed to fit.
And made
And then
more
of
awesome.
course, yeah, and then you get to Fury Road, and again, this is where it's kind of fun to just ignore the timeline and keep this all as different stories that happen at different times. But the car is pretty much worn out. Like, it's rusting, it's falling apart. He's actually gotten rid of one of the auxiliary fuel tanks. There's no interior whatsoever. The front end's all beat up.
The hole punched in one of the headlights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fun fact: the whole front of this car was fiberglass. It wasn't metal. But and it shows just how out of place the thing is, and how I guess it really hammers home how much Max was sort of out of his league, because the War Boys catch him almost immediately. He has a big head start, but they catch up to him and capture him with almost no effort. So it just shows that the car was at the end of its life. Max is sort of at the end of his. At least when the movie starts, he's at the end of his useful life, but he finds a new purpose as the movie goes on.
Yeah,
And then, of course,
those tires on his original car certainly weren't helping him off road. Those are pretty much normal road tires rather than the War Boys that had purpose built off road tires. That makes a huge
yeah,
difference on that surface.
yeah, and actually, you can't see it on this shot, but the right rear tire it's literally stitched together with old rags and like sinew. I mean, the whole idea is it's an iconic car, but it's completely, it's at the end of its useful life. So I'm curious
Out of its
what
element.
it is out of its element. And I'm kind of curious, if they do another Mad Max, what are they going to do with this car? Because I mean, first of all, they seem keen on destroying it because they've destroyed it twice. But will they bring it back where it's beefed up, like, so after Morton Joe captures it, they turn it into the Razor Cola, where it's been lifted. It's got the off-road tire. It's got 2 superchargers on it, because that always makes everything faster.
All the superchargers.
All the superchargers. And it's got weapons on the back and things like that. But, will they keep it more to the original spirit, where it's a road car that can kind of go off-road, or are they going to go a little more, Razor Cola style? And of course, like, it originally had plexiglass headlight covers. Now it's got razor wire headlight covers and big dash bar. And I'm kind of curious, what are they going to do with it? Because I feel like certain movie cars, like the General Lee, it is what it is. You don't want to change it too much. Or
So I feel like they're probably going to end up backing it up, because I don't know if you've heard or not, but the next Mad Max that's being planned is, and I think they finally finished the script, is a Furiosa prequel. So it's probably more than likely it's going, if you get an appearance from the Interceptor, it'll be more of the rusted, beat up, kind of maybe a cameo car somewhat, but it's not going to be the probably the Razor excessive version. It's going to backtrack back to Road Warrior or early Fury Road.
mm-hmm. It's still interesting. What would you, let's pretend for a second that maybe Max was able to salvage the Razor Cola. What would he do with that car? Obviously, he'd have to paint it black again, but would he leave it sort of jacked up, or would he return it to what it was? It's just kind of interesting. And it's, as far as a character goes, the Interceptor goes through a lot of change throughout the movies. It goes through a lot of, it's all off screen, but it goes through a lot of growth and development, and it is very much a living, breathing character in the movies. So would it make sense that in the future it goes back to the way it was, or does it keep evolving? And how does it evolve?
It all depends on if they made another Mad Max after Fury Road, how that progresses with Furiosa now in control of the Citadel.
Yep. Or again, what does Max do? So we'll see. I mean, if they do sort of a prequel, that makes a lot of sense. But if they don't, who knows? And of course, So finishing off on the Interceptor, the original two movies had the original Interceptor. They built a car for the first Mad Max. They gave it to the mechanic because they had no money whatsoever. Gave it to him after filming was wrapped up. He drove for a little while and then realized that even a fake supercharged engine still takes a lot of gas. So he tried to sell it. Nobody wanted to buy it. So he kept it, or it became sort of a show car and toured for a little bit. Then the production company bought it back, modified it for Road Warrior, put it into storage, and they were actually going to scrap it, but the junkyard owner didn't want to do that because he knew what it was and he didn't want to destroy a fairly iconic car. Sat in a junkyard for like a decade and a half, finally got spotted again. Someone else bought it, they restored it, and it moved around through a couple of different owners, but it now resides in Miami, in the Miami Auto Museum, the original car,
As of
which I
course
think
it
is
does.
oh, yeah. I mean, I just think it's great that again the original Mad Max Pursuit Special Interceptor still exists, and it's I don't remember how they've set it up, if they set it up as the original car or the Road Warrior car, but it's still great that it still exists out there because so many times an original movie car like that, especially a really iconic one, disappears. Tom, you probably know this better than me. How many Dodge Chargers did they destroy for the Dukes of Hazzard?
The prices shot up because of that show. They they made that. That was one of the during the muscle car boom when all these muscle cars were hitting six figures at Barrett Jackson. The Chargers were always one of the top ones because the Duke boys destroyed so many of them. It became a rare car.
Yeah, that was a joke that Hot Rod Magazine made. They said, "How did the value of these Chargers go up because they became desirable, or because there were so few of them left after the Dukes of Hazzard show wrapped up?"
The answer is
It's
yes.
and it's funny you bring that up. I remember reading an ad in the middle of this muscle car craze. Auto Week always had a little feature on like different cars that had sold. There was a 19, like I think it was a 71 Plymouth Cuda convertible in purple Hemi. It was fully optioned out. It only had 1,000 miles on it. It went for $1 million.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah, it was. We can talk about it afterwards, but yeah, those Hemi Chryslers get really expensive. So I think we're getting about to the point where normally Tom would make a guest squirm because it's trivia time, and I think it's about time we return the favor. So
Yep,
we're gonna
that's the
start
whole
off.
point of this.
We're gonna start off pretty easy, but we will be getting a bit more difficult. What is the base car for the V8 Interceptor? Not only the car, but also the front end. What's it called?
Or you're asking about the V8 Interceptor. Are we talking about the original Mad Max Interceptor, or are we talking the Road Warrior Interceptor Pursuit Special?
The Pursuit Special.
Pursuit Special. That was the Falcon GT. It was a '73. I didn't mean to rhyme. Which ended up being an XA, if I remember correctly, an XA GT.
It's actually an XB, but very close. And what was that front end conversion called? That aero conversion?
Oh man, that I do not know. You mentioned it was basically a racing one, so it had to have been something designed for the V8 supercar series. So I'm not familiar with the V8 supercars of that time.
It was called the Concorde front end.
Hmm, that
All
makes
right.
sense. The Concorde was a big thing back then.
Yeah, exactly. So, staying with the V8 Interceptor, the Ford Falcon was not the original choice for the Pursuit Special car. They were actually going to go with a completely different car. What was that original car supposed to be?
Hmm. I don't know the actual answer, so I'm just going to throw out a. Do I have to? I don't have to guess the year, do I?
No, you don't have to guess the year, just the make and model.
I'm going to go with the classic yin to its yang, and with the Holden Commodore.
Nope. I'll try to let you redeem yourself because you're already wrong. it was also a Ford.
Damn it! They weren't going to make it a Mustang, were they?
They were going to make it a Mustang.
Damn them Mustangs, man! They
Now
can't
the
be the
reason,
hero of every movie. Damn it!
well, the reason they didn't make it a Mustang was because so they were set on a Mustang, and then they started talking to the mechanic, and he goes, "Look, we're gonna have to do high speed chases. It has to be a maneuverable car. This thing is gonna break, and if it breaks, we can't get parts for it because the Mustang is an American car. So everything would have had to be imported from America to Australia in 1978, 79. So they said no, it's going to be impossible. So they went with the local car. They went with the Falcon.
Yeah, and if you watched Bullet, you'd know the Mustang of that era was not the most durable. That mechanic's absolutely right. It broke just in the streets of San Francisco, let alone the back of Australia.
Yep. So was going to be a Mustang. Then they stuck with the Falcon, which is definitely a better choice. All right. Going to go with an actor question here. Hugh Keys-Byrne plays two different characters in the Mad Max franchise in two completely different movies. What characters did he play?
What was the last name?
Hugh Keys-Byrne.
Oh, since we talked about it earlier, I feel like he was the organic mechanic in the, or no, he was the it was the scribe in the road in Fury Road that came back. I forget his actual character name, but it was the dude that basically took notes of everything that was destroyed. I know he was in one of the
People
original ones.
Eater. The
Yeah,
People
that
Eater.
one.
Wrong. Hugh Keys-Byrne. He played Immortan Joe.
Yes, he did. He was also in one of the earlier movies.
He played Toe Cutter, the original villain from Mad Max. So he played two of the big villains in Mad Max. Good. I hope all your
the first one.
I hope all your viewers are enjoying this.
See, I was going easy on you guys. Curly's not going easy, and I told him not to.
He did ask me to make it hard. All right, I have another actor one. This is actually really cool. What connection does Mad Max have to Elvis? And I'll be honest, I would not have known this unless my mom brought it up a week ago. So thanks, Mom.
Man, that's random.
I'd be actually really impressed if anyone else actually knew this one off the top of their heads. This is a genuinely hard one.
Yeah, I have no clue.
So one of the wives is capable. She's the redhead who has the relationship with Nux. That actress is Danielle Riley Keough, I think is the name. She is the daughter of Lisa Marie Presley, which makes her the eldest granddaughter of Elvis Presley.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, very random, very, again, fairly difficult. All right, let's go back to cars. The Giga Horse has two Cadillac Coupe de Ville bodies on it. When they originally designed the car, it was only going to have one Coupe de Ville body. What object did that second Coupe de Ville body replace? So what were they going to put on there instead of the second body, that back half body?
What are they going to replace?
Or what did they originally have there before they set it on the second car body?
I feel like this was in the special features, and I'm trying to remember it. I feel like it was a weapons system of some kind, but I can't remember.
You get partial credit. It was going to be a tank turret.
And that's it.
I'll give you partial credit for that. All right. And because I want to show off this car because I love it. Let's see. All right, this car they call the Elvis, which actually, if you had guessed this, I would have still given you credit. You can see that it is not a V8. it looks like it's got two V6s stuck together. Do you have any idea what this engine is out of? Because it's not two V6s welded together.
I took notes on this car too.
Yeah, this is one of the cars I really wish they spent more screen time on because it's friggin' cool.
Hmm. Was that wasn't out of a Countach, was it?
No, it's actually a truck engine. So it's a 702 cubic inch, and for those of us who only know engines as liters, it's 11 and a half liters. Um, it's called the Twin Six. It was made by GMC, and everyone confuses it for two V6s welded together. What they actually did was they cast the V12 block, but the cylinder heads are from the V6s. So it's got four cylinder heads, four sets of exhaust manifolds, two carburetors, one for each V6, and they made a ton of torque. This was actually built. This specific car was a hot rod about not quite 10 years ago. It's a well, the car itself is a 32 Ford, so it's a deuce coupe if you're into the Beach Boys. And someone in Australia is like, I wonder what it would look like if we put a V12 in the front of one of these things. So he took the V12, put it in there, and then a couple of years later, the production team, when they were first ramping up, bought the car. The original builder took off like the steel body, he took off all the valuable stuff, but gave them the the basic chassis and everything, and they put it together. That engine weighs almost 1,500 pounds. It's massive, and it makes 630 pound-feet of torque.
and that, if I remember correctly, that was also a twin-charged engine, both turbo and supercharged. In addition to all the
that one was not. I think you're thinking of, and I can't believe I didn't put a picture in here. I didn't put in a picture of the Nux car.
Yes, that was it. It was
Yeah,
32 Chevy, not the Ford.
32 Chevy, 5-window coupe. Where are my notes on it? Because I can't believe I didn't put a picture of that car in there.
Nitrous injected.
Nitrous, small block Chevy. The supercharger worked. The turbos didn't. 520 horsepower. Pretty wicked. They built 4 of them, and one of them is specifically set up for the scene where the car is driving backwards.
Yes.
And one of the things I remember out of the special features was when they were scouting for cars, they said they found the original car in America, and it had bullet holes in the windshield, and they said that's how they knew they had their post-apocalyptic car.
Yes.
And if I was going to go for a sort of boring choice, I think Nux's car is actually my favorite, like the normal style cars, because it is very much a hot rod. It's just ridiculously powered. And it's one of those cars that really, and you spend a lot of time in it early on. It really shows just how much love and care he being Nux, the character, has put into his car. There's all these little details. You got the little bobbing vulture head made out of scrap metal. You've got the really intricate steering wheel, the interior, all these just dozens and dozens of details into this car that will probably get destroyed at some point, but it's his car, it's his calling card, and he makes it very much his own.
And for more Tom Hardy doing stupid things, those scenes, they really did strap him to the front of that car.
Yep. I mean, there's a lot in that movie that is kind of very unrealistic. Mad Max should have been dismembered when that car crashed, but I don't care. Like it just makes it. Who cares about the inaccuracies? It's just a fun, ridiculous, insane movie, and it is completely larger than life, and it's all great. I've got one more trivia question for you, Tom. This one's
Do it.
It's all about big block Chevys.
Yay.
How much power did the Gigahorse, when it was all put together, how much power did it make with those two engines combined? Keeping in mind they're supercharged but not turbocharged, and they're big blocks.
I think I remember them saying combined I think it made about 1,000.
So, pretty close, 1,200 horsepower.
Did I write that down? And I did not write it down, but I do remember that.
Okay, so between getting the Falcon right and being half right on weapon system and engine, you got 2 out of, I think I asked you 8. So, viewers,
So
that is your revenge.
yes, I get a nice sad showing out of that.
So that's really all the cars I really wanted to talk about. I threw in a couple others here from Road Warrior, and they're not all that interesting. Like the Landau, which just has a couple of carburetors sitting up on the hood and immediately crashes. It is very fun to watch the cars evolve throughout the series. And again, no matter what the next Mad Max is, whether it's a prequel or a sequel or wherever it fits in the timeline, it's going to be very interesting to see how they make the cars fit in with that and how they evolve them. Do they evolve them forward or backwards, or is it for example, I'd find it very interesting if they went before the nuclear apocalypse implied in Thunderdome, to where you could actually have some actual modern cars in there somewhere where they haven't all been destroyed.
But that would be far less interesting. And I do have now that we're done trivia. I have one quick trivia question to throw to you because I specifically kept quiet during when we were talking about the Doof Warrior. So the badge of what car was on the Doof Warrior's guitar?
It was a Datsun 1600.
It was a Datsun. Datsun
Datsun.
1600.
Ah, yes. Success.
I figured you'd know the guitar one.
Of course.
But
yeah, it's kind of interesting. Everyone calls it a double neck guitar. It's actually a combined guitar and bass. If you look at the top neck that he's playing on when he does the flamethrower bit, that's an actual 6-string guitar, but the bottom neck is a 4-string bass. I don't know if anybody who's watching right now cares, but I do.
Just musically, I'm not sure how that works. It would be a weird sound.
Well, it's only weird because if I had put that together, I would have switched the necks because a guitarist always thinks that the highest string is at the very, we call it the top, but it would be the physical bottom of the guitar, and then your lowest string is the one closest to your body. So I would have switched all that around. It would have basically been in a very extended range guitar because a standard guitar is 6 strings. This would be a 10-string guitar if you really want to think about it that way. But it was just kind of interesting how it's a guitar and a bass at once. Like they have a percussion section and they have a guitarist, but screw the bassist. We'll just combine them into the guitarist. Yeah, the doof wagon, very, very cool. But I could not give up the Gigahorse. Again, it's just ridiculous and insane. And
I had the feeling you'd either pick the Doof Wagon or the Gigahorse, so I figured I'd leave those alone.
Yeah, again, it's and for me, I'm, as Tom very well knows, I have a lot of insane car ideas in my head, and these even top things that I've thought of, and that's what I love. Is like, again, someone went, they just looked at all this stuff and they're like, let's put it all together in this way. And it's when you see something like that, you really want to get inside the designer's head because it's just because again, it's a piece of art. It's a functional piece of art, but it's still a piece of art. And I have a particular fondness for the old Ed Roth. What's the other one? But the Ed Roth style cars, they're all, it was like a Corvette chassis, but everything on top of it was completely custom. It was all made out of fiberglass. They looked wild and insane. And Von Dutch, that was the other one. Ed Roth and Von Dutch, just those kinds of cars from the 60s. I have a particular fondness for them because they were really, really bonkers. And car customizers today don't do that. Like if you go to a car show now, you'll see a Volkswagen Golf Slam, so it's like a 1/4 inch from the ground, or you'll see a Dodge Charger with 1,000,000 horsepower or whatever, but you don't see anything completely different. You don't ever see anything that's just so wild you can barely recognize. And I really appreciate about the Mad Max franchises. They just went completely hog wild with their imagination. And they did that in all the movies. So again, as someone who enjoys, well, who would love to do what these people have done, but doesn't have the time, budget, or resources, I really appreciate what they have done with the vehicles and just how wild and insane they went, and especially when they had the chance to.
And they had the money to.
Yes. The money, the time, and the vision. Put all those together and you get Fury Road. And I want to briefly mention, so I said that my mom brought up the whole thing with the Elvis connection. So they came and visited me for Thanksgiving, and they have not seen any of the Mad Max movies. And I'd mentioned that I was going to do this podcast, and I said, all right, we don't have to see the whole movie, but I said, you at least have to see one of the chase scenes. And I showed them the scene, the opening chase scene where they are chasing Furiosa and the buzzards attack, and then they go into the sandstorm. And we watched, I was like, all right, we can turn it off. And I was like, no, I want to see what happens next. And we ended up watching the entire movie. And then we looped back to the beginning so they could see the opening couple of scenes. Like, that's how good of a movie it is. They had zero interest in seeing it, but they still enjoyed the crap out of it once they saw it.
Well, again, and of the series, the storm is probably one of the more artistic scenes in that franchise. It's this between the score and the visuals. You could see it flipping back and forth between the black and chrome, which was the original intent of the movie, was to be black and white, switching back between the black and white and the color palette that they had to add in later.
Yeah, it's one of those, they could have added in a bunch of lines of the wives screaming and Furiosa screaming back and all of the different, all the different characters interacting with each other. There was so much dialogue they could have written, but instead they just used the visuals, they used the music, and then they just threw in one of the greatest lines of all time. Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Oh,
and
nice.
that's all you needed to, make that scene as epic as it was. Everything else about it is, again, done through the visuals and the audio, and it's perfect.
Really is. What a wonderful scene.
Wonderful scene and a wonderful movie. Minor gripes about, Mad Max should be dead and he didn't speak with enough of an Australian accent. Don't care. Thoroughly enjoyed that movie. And again, I'm glad that was the first one I saw, because it genuinely, because everyone had told me, because everyone knows I love cars. They're like, have you ever seen Mad Max? I'm like, I never got around to seeing it. I'm like, you didn't see Mad Max? You should love those movies. And, if I'd started out with The Road Warrior, which I'd seen bits and pieces of, I think I would have enjoyed it, but Fury Road just set off an obsession. Like, I'm not kidding. So I saw Fury Road on a flight to Japan, which is just about a year ago. Actually, flight is either to or from Japan, but I saw it on the smallest screen known to man and loved the hell out of it. I came home, I bought the DVD, I bought the original Mad Max DVD, I bought the video game, played the game obsessively, and again, it sort of set off a bit of an obsession with that, because it's just such a wonderful movie, and it absolutely fits me. It's got everything I want out of a movie.
If you had watched the original first, you may not have gone back to the other Mad Max movies. So, again, good thing you started with Road Warrior or Fury Road.
At least I knew enough not to start with Thunderdome.
Yes, good thing you did that last. That was the correct decision.
Yeah, and I do want to briefly bring up the video game, because it's one of my favorite games, but it's also a huge disappointment, because, again, now that I've sort of gone through and I know a lot more about the lore of Mad Max, they take so many themes and ideas and cues out of all four movies, and they do a wonderful job of putting them together. It is a huge and diverse world that they create in this video game, and they literally do nothing to it. The plot wouldn't even fill out a movie, and it's so disappointing, because again, hugely detailed world. There's so much they could have done with it, and for whatever reason, they wrote a plot in about an hour, put it in the game, and then sold it. And it's just such a disappointment because I could see so many more things for that game to be. Like, that is a game that would be perfect as an MMO where you set up your own base, you create a clan with your buddies, you war against other car-based factions, you build up a factory, you build up a gas town, you build up a bullet farm, you build up a citadel. There's so much you could have done with that world, and they just threw it at you and like, have fun with your. The only reason that game lasts more than 2 hours is because you sit there and you do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And again, it would be great if they just did something with this beautiful, detailed world they put together. It's just so close to being one of the greatest games of all time, and they just missed out on it. It's very sad to me because I love driving around and just screwing with war boys. But once you beat the game, there's nothing to do, and you beat the game. If you just follow the direct plot, it would probably take you about an hour. It's quite sad because it's so close to being epic. It just needs something to do.
One of these days, I'll actually get to playing that game. I own it on Steam, but I have not gotten to it yet.
Yeah, and it takes a little bit. Well, when you start out, it's actually very difficult. Like, it very much follows the spirit of Road Warrior, where you have a shotgun, but you don't have a lot of ammo for it, and it's really difficult to reload. So it's better just to punch people to death. Or your car has no gas in it, and whenever you find gas, there's not a lot. So you have to be very particular about where you travel in the game. It's very hard to fight the enemies. You have to be strategic about how you fight them. And then as you advance in the game, the enemies don't get any harder, but you get all these other skills, so it ends up being really easy. Like, the difficulty curve is almost, I don't want to say it's backwards, but it doesn't ramp up enough to how quickly your character improves. And again, there's this huge, vast world, but they don't really do anything with it. The plot it's thin, and that's saying something for a Mad Max, visual thing. But the whole reason the only way that they filled out the runtime, and it was just by giving you repetitive tasks over and over. And there's so much more they could do with that world. Like I said, if it was an MMO, it would be awesome. Or if they'd just given it more of a plot, it would have been awesome. Because I still get a kick, almost a year later, I still get a kick going around and exploring the camps because there's just so much stuff to see.
So since you've played the video game, we'll kind of finish off this. Sam in the chat has played the video game, has been talking about it basically the entire time. One of his questions was, what do you think has a better sound system, the Doofwagon or the Crow Dazzle?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to go with the Doofwagon. First of all, because it has its own drum section, and also because it has its own flamethrower, which automatically makes it the winner. But sonically, I think the Doofwagon has more speakers, and more importantly, has its own percussion section, and those drums are friggin' massive. So yeah. I would give it to the Doofwagon. But you get to drive Crow Dazzle's car, which is pretty sweet. They actually threw in a lot of cars that are referenced in Fury Road, like the Elvis car. You actually get to drive it. They paint it gold, but it's a V12. And there's a couple others that show. And then there's a lot of cues, like one of the camps. The camp is inside of an old nuclear cooling tower, and the actual area where the leader of the camp is identical to Tina Turner's in Bartertown.
Nice.
Yeah, so again, there's like a lot of these little cues and references and things that show up. That if you're a big fan of the movies, you'll definitely get a kick out of them as you see them. But again, it's just like, I remember going into the final battle, I'm like, wait, it's over? Like, there's been all this buildup because I've been doing these repetitive tasks, and it's like, it's just very anticlimactic. Also, the villain, through most of the game, has a chainsaw stuck in his head, and you put it there. It's so close to being an epic game. So close to being an epic game.
It's kind of awesome, but kind of dumb at the same time.
Well, anyway. So he's one of Immortan Joe's sons, and it's kind of the start of Fury Road, where he's chasing you and you have to fight him, and his weapon is a chainsaw on a pole. And you take it from him and you try to kill him, but it doesn't kill him. It just gets the blade lodged right in the middle of his skull, and it cuts his brain in half, and he's in immense pain, and he just goes absolutely insane. And then you get to fight him later when he's just hopped up and insane. Again, very, very detailed, very vast world. They just don't do anything with it. And when you get to the end, it's just like it falls on its face, and it's so disappointing because it could have been so much better. And I wish I knew why, because it feels like it was rushed. They spent all their time on this world, and then they're like, oh crap, we got to get this game out in a month. We got to put a plot to it.
Huh.
And I don't know if it was budget or if it was time constraints or what, because if they just given it a little more time, I have no doubt. I have no doubt it would have been
tough.
Yeah, and you know, it was probably a bit of both. Probably a bit of budget, probably a bit of timing, because I think it had to come out with the movie. But if they just given it a little more time, it would have been definitely, in my opinion, one of the great games of all time, and definitely of its year when it came out, which is, I think, 2015. But it's still fun. It's still fun if you enjoy Mad Max.
Anyway, I think we're slowing down a bit here, so I'll grab the hosting reins back. And Curly, where can we find you?
So I'm still on Moto IQ, and actually, I need to thank both Tom and Devon, since he was a part of this. So the editors of Moto IQ, I told them about the Rush podcast, and they went back and watched it, and they loved it. And I actually ended up getting a column on Moto IQ talking about Formula One. It's called Curly's Corner, and I think I'm up to my 5th column now. I've been doing them after every single race, and it's been a lot of fun. It's genuinely a lifelong dream. I've always wanted to write up commentary on racing, and the fact that I get to do that for Moto IQ now is just awesome. So thank you, Tom. Thank you, Cars and Popcorn, for setting up that opportunity, because it was all just a trickle of things that turned into from doing a podcast on Rush into a full-blown Formula One column. My last edition went live on Thursday. I was talking about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, about 5 words on Abu Dhabi, and then the rest was about the season review, because Abu Dhabi was a pretty boring race. This week I've got a piece on Project Viacross. It's finally coming back. I fixed the suspension on it. I just finished fixing the brakes on it, so you'll be seeing more of that. And then in this box right here, I have moped parts, which I know Tom doesn't care about. But if you like mopeds, I got a new shock. I got some other parts. I'm going to be rebuilding the engine in that over the winter time. So that will be another upcoming story on Moto IQ. And I get to go to the PRI show this weekend. Performance racing industry. I've never done that, and that will probably be some pretty cool stuff in the next week or two.
And yeah, that's gonna be pretty awesome. I love going to car shows, the industry shows, and you get to go to a custom industry show, which I don't know is better or worse than what I get to do.
It's all about race cars, so racing engines, racing electronics, racing fabrication.
So probably better.
It should be pretty friggin' cool.
But probably better. And Curly's Corner from Moto IQ, I will have that in the description when I finalize this post. So make sure you go to Curly's Corner and give him a few clicks. That's the least we can do for helping launch the show. And of course, do all those YouTube things, liking, subscribing, all those other things that aren't really going to matter at these low numbers. So and of course, follow me at Road Raider 3. And for Curly, have a lovely day.
It is Ragged Budget Racing on Instagram. And by the way, since we didn't bring it up at the beginning, Tom, happy birthday. The whole reason I'm hosting this is birthday's tomorrow, so make sure you all wish Tom a happy birthday. I won't say his age. I won't embarrass him that much. Youngin.
That's not that embarrassing. We're pretty much the same age at this point. So everybody have a wonderful day. We'll be back sometime next year. I have not announced that yet because I haven't thought that far in the future. Have a lovely day, everyone. A lovely, lovely day.
Mediocre!
Mediocre!